Today's lesson is on adding and subtracting fractions, and we're going to start with the side that says lesson 3, and it's adding and subtracting like fractions. Like fractions means that the denominators are the same. And just as a review, when you add two fractions together, you have to have the same denominator. And what you do is the denominator stays the same. So if the denominator is c in both fractions, the answer is going to have a denominator of c. And the numerator is found by just adding these two numbers together. So here's kind of the rule we're going to follow for adding fractions. And we're going to do a few together. So we start out pretty easy. 2/9 plus 4/9. Notice that the denominator stays the same of 9, and we're just going to add 2 plus 4 to get 6/9. Now please make sure you notice in the directions, write in simplest form. So in this case, this is not simplified because they both have a factor of 3. So when you divide the top and the bottom by 3, 6 divided by 3 is 2, 9 divided by 3 is 3. The answer is 2/3. Okay, so you're going to continue doing that, and you get to something like this. Same concept, but now it's subtracting. So you do the same thing. The denominator stays the same, but you do 8 minus 7, which is 1. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Life looks pretty good until we get down to something like number 10. Number 10 is -7/10 minus 4/10. So in this case, we want to keep in mind our rules of subtracting. So remember, when we subtract a number, that's the same as adding the opposite. So we draw a line, change the sign. And now these are the same sign, they're both negatives. So we have 7 negatives plus 4 negatives, and we add them all up. We add up how many negatives we have total. So notice nothing's canceling off, and we're left with 11 negatives on top, and our denominator stays the same of 10. Now if you notice, this is an improper fraction because 10 is smaller than 11, so we do some dividing. 10 goes into 11 one whole time with 1 left over, and we bring that negative sign along for the ride. So our answer is -1 1/10. Okay, we're going to continue doing that anytime we see a negative sign. So for instance, let's see, something down here for -19. We've got 3/12 plus 1/12 minus 11/12 is the same as adding a -11/12. And you're going to do 3 plus 1 plus -11. So in this case, we're going to have 3 positives plus 1 positive plus 11 negatives. So you're going to have to figure out how many of these are going to die off and what you're left with. Okay? So you are going to complete this worksheet first, adding and subtracting like terms. And you can pause the video to do that, and when you're finished, you can start it and get a little bit of notes on unlike fractions. So on the back, we're going to turn over to unlike fractions. And unlike fractions are when the denominator is not the same. So when the denominator is not the same, you first have to do a little bit of multiplying to get them to have the same denominator. So in this first example, I know that 6 is a factor of 18. And I realize that if I were to multiply 5/6 by 3/3, what you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. So if I'm going to multiply the bottom by 3, 6 times 3 is 18. 5 times 3 is 15. I've just made an equivalent fraction. So 5/6 is the same as 15/18. Then I bring down the 1/18. Now I have common denominators. I can add just like I did on the previous page. 15 plus 1 is 16. And now I can reduce. And when I divide these each by 2, I get 8/9 as an answer. Okay. All right, so let's go down to something like, well, I'll give you a hint for number 3. The common denominator you're going to need to make is 48. So think to yourself, what do you have to multiply by 12 to get 48? And then you have to multiply the top by that as well. So 12 times 4 is 48. 5 times 4 is 20. Bring down the subtraction. And then again, ask yourself, what do you multiply 16 by to get 48? And that's 3. So you have to multiply the 9 by the 3 as well. Now we subtract. 27 minus 20 is 7. The denominator stays the same, so you get 7/48. Okay, when you have unlike denominators, you also could be dealing with positives and negatives. So you get a common denominator first, and then you add the opposite. So in this case, I can see that my common denominator is going to be 30. So I'm going to have to multiply this by 3. So I get negative 21 plus, and then to make this have a denominator of 30, I'm going to have to multiply everything by 2. So I get negative 8. So I've got 21 negatives plus 8 negatives is 29 negatives over 30. And I'm done. Okay. If you look at number 10, you've got a whole number 1, and we have to subtract 3/4. Well, you've got to get a common denominator. So 3/4 has a denominator of 4. So is there a way to write the number 1 as something over 4? Well, hopefully you remember that any number over itself always equals 1. So this is 4/4 minus 3/4, and you get 1/4. Okay. All right, so then you are going to complete this side as well. So you've got 2 worksheets to do. Make sure that you're showing work as much as possible. And when you're finished, you may go to Alex. Thank you.